Welcome to Lesson 35 in our study of the Old Testament history. We're in the history of the Hebrew nation, particularly during the period of the United Kingdom. We're studying David's reign over Israel and Judah, and this is our second lesson. This lesson will deal with the messianic promise given to David and the wars of expansion, with little parentheses of a beautiful relationship that David had with Jonathan that is going to help and benefit his son Mephibosheth. Let's start with this messianic promise in chapter 7. First of all, David has a legitimate and a godly desire and feeling about his relationship to God in his house and God's house. Read that with me in chapter 7, the first 3 verses. After the king was settled in his palace, 2 Samuel 7, beginning with verse 1. After the king was settled in his palace, and the Lord had given him rest from all his enemies round him. We studied that last time, where David had fought wars of consolidation. Now he'll fight wars of expansion in this period, but he consolidated his empire. He had fought against the Ammonites and the Jebusites and the Philistines and found rest among all of his enemies for a while. And so now he gets to thinking, and here's what he thought. He said to Nathan the prophet, "Here I am, living in a palace of cedar, while the ark of God remains in a tent." That's a legitimate thought. I'm living in better environment than God is living. It's also an immature thought, because God inhabits the universe. He doesn't inhabit that tent. But David is thinking, I'm providing better for myself than for God. Would to God that all of God's people thought that way, and would want God in His way provided for better and in a more significant way than themselves. So it's a legitimate, godly thought, though immature. And Nathan also thinks that's a good idea. Nathan replied to the king, "Whatever you have in mind, go ahead and do it, for the Lord is with you." Neither one of them asked God what he wanted. When David went to battle, he always inquired of God. But now that he's doing this, for some reason, he thinks he can do God a good deed, a favor, and build him a better house to live in. Beginning in verse 4, you have God's answer to David. And you're going to find out some things, rather surprisingly maybe, about God and His desire. First of all, God says in answer to David, I have absolutely no desire for a house to live in. I don't need a house built for me. Notice, God speaking to Nathan beginning in verse 4. That night, the word of the Lord came to Nathan, saying, "Go and tell my servant David this. This is what the Lord says. Are you the one to build me a house to dwell in? I have not dwelt in a house from the day I brought the Israelites up out of Egypt to this day. I've been moving from place to place with a tent as my dwelling. Wherever I've moved with all the Israelites, did I ever say to any of their rulers whom I commanded to shepherd my people Israel, why have you not built me a house of cedar?" Now they had begun living in cedar houses as soon as they entered the land, because they lived in the houses that had been built by the 7 tribes, Canaanites, Hittites, Perizzites, and all those ites. They were living in their houses, rock houses, sealed houses, cedar houses. I mean, they were living in houses others had built. God had never said to a single one of the 15 judges, I need a house to live in, because He doesn't really even live in this movable tent. That's just the place where He puts the sign that He's among them. God says, I have never desired a physical place to live, because a spirit that is omnipresent couldn't live in a physical house or a tent. Anyway, so He says, I have no desire for you to build me a house in which I can live. Now then He says, I'm going to bless you. You want to bless me, and I honor that desire. And so I'm going to bless you personally. Then I'm going to bless your seed. Now notice the personal blessing promise starting in verse 8. Let's read 8 through 11a, and then see the blessings that He promised David personally. Speaking to Nathan, He says, now then, tell my servant David, this is what the Lord Almighty says, El Shaddai. I took you from the pasture and from following the flock to be ruler over my people Israel. I have been with you wherever you've gone, and I've cut off all your enemies from before you. Now I will make your name great, like the names of the greatest men of the earth. I will provide a place for my people Israel, and I will plant them so that they can have a home of their own and no longer be disturbed. Wicked people will not oppress them anymore as they did at the beginning, and have done ever since the time I appointed leaders over my people Israel. I will also give you rest from all of your enemies. Notice the promises made to David here. What he's going to do for David, because David had a legitimate desire to build God a house. Immature, but legitimate. Isn't it good to know that God does not demand maturity before he bestows his blessings? He doesn't demand a total and a complete understanding of his word and his way and his will before he bestows great blessings upon his people. He says, number one, I will make you prince over my people. He said, I have made you prince over my own people. That's the blessing. I have caused you to be the ruler of my people. He says, I blessed you in everything you've done, and I have made you victorious over all of your enemies. That's the past blessings he has bestowed upon David that David presently enjoys the benefits of. I've made you king. I've blessed you physically. I've made you victorious over all of your enemies. Not a single enemy has been able to stand before David. He says, I'm going to give you two future blessings. I will make your name great. David wanted God's name to be great. He wanted God to dwell in a much superior place than he himself was dwelling. And so God says, I will make your name great. Even today, people honor the name of David in Judaism, in Islam, and in Christianity. David's name is honored greatly. And through him, he says, not only will I make your name great, but through you, I will cause Israel to have a secure place to stand. You wanted me to have a place to live. So because of that, I will take you and your power and your strength and your faithfulness, and I will give Israel a secure place to stand. I don't believe any of that refers to Christ or the church yet. But what we're about to read will. Because he not only says to David, I will bless you personally, he says, I will bless your seed. That is, those that come after you. Not just Solomon, but all of those that come after you. And not just those who come after him physically, but also who come after him both physically and spiritually. Notice, we'll read 11, the latter part, through 17, and then we'll come back and discuss what refers to Solomon, what refers to Israel, and what refers to the church. God's still speaking to Nathan, and Nathan is to tell this to David. So God's speaking to David. The Lord, the eternal, declares to you that the eternal himself will establish a house for you. You want to build me a house? I'll build you one. When your days are over and you rest with your fathers, I will raise up your offspring, seed, to succeed you, who will come from your own body. And I will establish his kingdom. He is the one who will build a house for my name. And I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. The first part of that could refer to Solomon. The second part could not. I will be his father. He will be my son. When he does wrong, I will punish him with the rod of men, with flogging inflicted by men. But my love will never be taken away from him, as I took it away from Saul, whom I removed from before you. Your house and your kingdom will endure forever before me. Your throne will be established forever. Nathan reported to David all the words of this entire revelation. Now, what God said he would do, not this time just for David, but for David's seed. Number one, he says, I will make you a house. He doesn't mean a physical dwelling place. He doesn't mean wood and stone and marble and precious stones. He means a progeny, a posterity, a people to follow him. I will make you a long and a great house, like in England, the House of Tudor, or the House of Orange, or other kingly houses. He says, I will make you a ruling dynasty. He says, after your death, this is the second thing he says, after your death, I will establish your seeds kingdom. Not your kingdom, but your seed's kingdom. I'll make you a house. That's the seed to follow him, the offspring. And after your death, I will make your offspring a kingdom. So his house is going to become a ruling house, as we would say a dynasty, a kingdom. Then he says in the third place that his seed will build God a house for God's name. Now I'm positive that refers to Solomon. Surely it does. Because as soon as David is dead and Solomon is the king, Solomon begins to build the house that David wanted to build. But I'm also sure that it refers to Christ. For the writer of Hebrews says that the Son, Christ, is the builder of the house, whose house we are. We are God's house, and Jesus builds that house. Jesus said, upon this rock I will build my church. Jesus builds us upon the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Ephesians chapter 2. We are the household of God, and God's house is going to be built by David's seed. Not just that physical house built by Solomon, but that spiritual house of which that physical one was only typical. It said his seed's throne. He also says that the throne of his seed will be established forever. They're the throne of David, and the throne of David's seed is pronounced to be an eternal throne. As Jesus is being announced in the book of Luke, the angel says to Mary, I will give unto him the throne of his father David, and he will rule over it forever. Notice his father David. Sure, it referred to Solomon in the fact that God established his throne, but that throne ceased to exist with Coniah, as we'll study later, or Jeconiah, as he's also called. That seed will cease then. It will not be a seed anymore. God says, write this man, Jeconiah, childless. None of his seed will rule on the throne forever, but David's will. And when Jesus is born, David is that long promise, that long-awaited Jesus is that long-awaited seed of David that will sit on the throne of David forever. And last of all in what we read, his house, David's house, and his kingdom, David's kingdom, or the seed's house and the seed's kingdom, will last forever. We dwell today in an eternal house, in an eternal kingdom that cannot be shaken. Hebrews 12 says that another kingdom might be established after it. This kingdom that we're in, called the house of David, the house of Abraham, the seed promised in Genesis 3:15, traced through Abraham, is now traced through David. And that seed, the Messiah, Jesus Christ, his house, his kingdom, will last forever. Then notice, last of all here in 2 Samuel 7, David's prayer. Let's read that in verses 18 to 29, and then we'll see some points about that prayer. Then King David went in. As soon as he heard about this revelation, he believed it, because it came from God through God's prophet. Then King David went in and sat before the Lord, and he said, who am I? This is verses 18 to 20. David's humility. He said, who am I? Who am I, O sovereign Lord? And what is my family that you have brought me this far? And as if this were not enough in your sight, O sovereign Lord, you've also spoken about the future of the house of your servant. Is this your usual way of dealing with man, O sovereign Lord? What more can David say to you? For you know your servant, O sovereign Lord. He said, who am I? He said, I don't feel at all worthy of anything that you've said you do to your servant. You've done so many things for me. I have not even thought of asking for myself anymore. And isn't that why David's getting it? David's getting it because he is thankful for what God has done, makes no requirement upon God for what God will do. He says, Lord, I'm your servant. Do whatever you think best. If I'm to be blessed, I'll accept your blessing and give you credit for it. If I'm to be cursed, it's beyond anything I deserve. Whatever happens to me is more than I really deserve to happen to me. That's a great attitude in prayer. Who am I that I would expect this great thing? Then in verses 21 to 24, he says, do it for yourself. Whatever you do for yourself and do for Israel. Notice beginning in 21, for the sake of your word and according to your will, you've done this great thing and made it known to your servant. It is for you, Lord. I recognize that your name and your will and your word is to be magnified by this. How great you are, O sovereign Lord. There is no one like you. There is no God but you, as we've heard with our own ears. And who is like your people Israel? First of all, he says there's nobody like you. So do it for yourself, Lord. Do it because you deserve the honor. And your name needs to be magnified. Then he said, do it for Israel. And who is like your people Israel? The one nation on earth that God went out to redeem as a people for himself and to make a name for himself and to perform great and awesome wonders by driving out nations and their gods from before your people whom you redeemed from Egypt. You've established your people Israel as your very own forever. And you, O Lord, O Eternal, have become their God. He says, do it for their sake. As you for their sake brought them out of Egypt. As you for their sake drove out all the tribes before them in Canaan's land. Do it for that reason, Lord. Do it for yourself and do it for Israel. Then in 25 to 29, he says, now, because of your promise, may my house bless you, O God. Notice 25 beginning. And now, that's in the past. We've been praising you for your past action. And now, eternal God, keep forever the promise you've made concerning your servant and his house. Do as you promised, so that your name will be great forever. Not my name, not the name of David, but your name. Then men will say, the Lord Almighty is God over Israel, and the house of your servant David will be established before you. O Lord Almighty, God of Israel, you have revealed this to your servant, saying, I will build a house for you. So your servant has found courage to offer you this prayer. O sovereign Lord, you are God. Your words are trustworthy, and you promised these good things to your servant. Now be pleased to bless the house of your servant, that it may continue forever in your sight. For you, Lord, O sovereign Lord, have spoken, and with your blessing the house of your servant will be blessed forever. David seems willing now, and that's a strange way to put it, but it's that way. David seems willing now to accept this blessing. Early was not, who am I that I should receive this blessing? Oh, I see. You're doing it for your name. You're doing it for Israel's name. So use my house, O Lord, to bless your name forever. Wouldn't that be a good way to look at God's blessings? For us to think, yes, Lord, though I don't deserve it, I'm willing to accept your blessing. Now bless me, so that my house and my life may be a blessing to me. A lot of that refers to Christ, but most of it refers to David himself and his seed after him. We'd like to talk about that more. Well, we got some more in this lesson to cover. Chapters 8 through 10 is David's wars of expansion. First of all, he consolidated his empire. Israel and Judah accepted him as king. And God makes these great promises about his future, because it was in his heart to do God's will, to build God a house, and to cause God's name to be known through all the earth. Now he must fight wars, because he must extend his border back to the promised limit, from the river of Egypt, the Wadi down in the south, under the great river, the river Euphrates. First of all, there's a Moabite war in verses 1 and 2 of chapter 8. In the course of time, David defeated the Philistines and subdued them. He took Methec Ammah from the control of the Philistines. David also defeated the Moabites. He made them lie down on the ground and measured them off with a length of cord. Every 2 lengths of them were put to death, and the 3rd length was allowed to live. So he killed 2/3 of the people of Moab. So the Moabites became subject to David and brought tribute. Why didn't he do as he did when he was fighting for Gath and kill man, woman, and child? Who's Moab? Where did Moab come from? It was a result of the incestuous relationship between Lot and his eldest daughter. Remember? As they fled Sodom. These are kinsmen. These are not people that can be slaughtered. They must be, by God, taught not to rebel against God's appointed leader. But he is merciful in that 1/3 of them live and become servants to David. Then he fights a war with Zobah. Now, Zobah is the territory from Damascus to the Euphrates. Damascus and below is Syria, but Zobah is that northernmost territory. In Moab, he defeated to the south and to the east. In Zobah, to the north. Moreover, David fought Hadarezer, son of Rehob, king of Moab, when he went to restore his control along the Euphrates River. David captured, watch this. David captured 1,000 chariots, 7,000 charioteers, and 20,000 foot soldiers. Well, that's a lot of people. He hamstrung all but 100 of the chariot horses. He is not going to multiply horses, as later his son Solomon will, in violation of the commandment of Deuteronomy 17 about the kings. But Zobah has been defeated. And then the Arameans, or the Syrians of Damascus, are defeated. When the Arameans, or Syrians, of Damascus came to help Hadarezer, king of Moab, David struck down 22,000 of them. David's some kind of warrior. He slew 22,000 Syrians. He put garrisons in the Aramean kingdom of Damascus, and the Arameans became subject to him and brought tribute. The Lord gave David victory wherever he went. By the way, he also takes the golden shields that belong to Hadarezer and brings them into the temple of God. And then there's war against the Edomites, starting in verse 9. Those are to the due south. So he will have taken all the promised land when he gets through with this battle. Well, not quite. There's still that middle territory east of the Jordan, which he'll have to get with the next war, the Ammonite war. Then I'm in verse 9, 2 Samuel 8. Then king of Hamath, heard that David had defeated the entire army of Hadarezer. He sent his son Joram to King David to greet him and congratulate him on his victory in battle over Hadarezer, who'd been at war with Joram brought with him articles of silver and gold, and David dedicated these unto God, as he'd done with the silver and gold from the nations he'd subdued: Edom, Moab, Ammonites, Philistines, and Amalek. He also dedicated the plunder taken from Hadarezer, son of Rehob, king of Zobah. And David became famous after he'd returned from striking down 18,000 Edomites in the Valley of Salt. I've not added that up, but I've already counted over 100,000 men that David and his army had either slaughtered or captured, along with thousands of chariots and thousands of chariot horses. After this, it says he put garrisons throughout Edom, and all the Edomites became subject to David. The Lord gave David victory wherever he went. In chapter 9, there's a beautiful illustration here of what a covenant results in. Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, has been down in the desert country. Got crippled as they were running out of Saul's house, and he's getting along on a crutch down there in the desert, always fearing every sound, because he believed that David wanted to kill him, because that's what Saul had been feeding this young man. One day David's war wagons rode into Mephibosheth's village. Mephibosheth surely thought to kill him, but instead of killing him, they put him in that chariot and brought him to David. And David says, I've hunted for you, not to judge you, but to give kindness to the one remaining child of Jonathan. I had a covenant with Jonathan, and therefore my entire house belongs to you. You're as one of my sons. He gave him servants to bathe him and to clothe him. He gave him a place at his table, and David's tablecloth covered his crippled legs, and he ate at David's table. I can imagine somebody coming in one day and saying, what are you doing here at David's table? And he would reply, I don't know. Ask the king. And if you ask David, he'd say, go down the hallway and look up there on the wall, and you see a shield and a garment and a spear and a sword. That's what Jonathan gave me as sign and token that our blood was mingled, that we're blood brothers, that we're under blood covenant. Mephibosheth eats at my table because I made a covenant with his father. I eat today at the table of the Lord because my Lord made a covenant with my father, and he takes care of me, and he feeds me. Mephibosheth is me, the crippled one, crippled in sin, that is now being honored by the king, fed by the king, housed by the king, clothed by the king. The king provides all my needs. In chapter 10, there's a war that prepares us for next time's lesson. He fights a war with the Ammonites. he and Joab do. They win 3 different battles against the Ammonites. But the Ammonites are a powerful nation, and they're still not yet subdued. So at the end of that 3rd battle, it's over for a while, and they return each one to their place. Chapter 11 is going to say in verse 1, when the time came for kings to go out to battle. They fought their war in seasons, much like we hunt our animals. And war season was over, and they were not totally through with the war, so they went home. Next year, when the time came for battle to occur, they will come and join battle again. The first time, in all of those 3 battles that Joab was fighting, David was where he belonged, in front of the army, leading them toward victory. The 4th time out, the 2nd time out for the 4th battle, it was so close to being over that David didn't think he needed to be there. So he's going to be at the wrong place, at the wrong time, and therefore will do the wrong thing. We'll study that next time. What we've learned in today's lesson is that if we want God's name to be great and blessed on the earth, then God will make our name great, and we will be blessed in all the earth. Seek first God and His kingdom, and all these things will be added unto you. More next time.